Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and as of me recording this, today is my wife's birthday. So if you happen to see her on social media, be sure to wish her a happy birthday, or feel free to leave it in the comments section here. Either way, I'm sure she would love to hear from you guys. All that said, we actually celebrated her birthday last week because there was a convention relatively close to where we live, and some of our favorite voice actors were there. One of them being Michael Bell, who, among other things, worked on the Smurfs. He was the voice of Hefty Smurf, Grouchy Smurf, and Lazy Smurf, as well as a ton of generic Smurfs for crowd scenes, etc. And we had the extremely good fortune to be able to just hang out with those guys all afternoon. And we were talking about my role playing game quite a bit. And at one point, Michael asked me if the Smurfs were in my game. And I kind of laughed and I said they were not. And he asked, why not? So I felt kind of on the spot. And my daughter was there, and she's a huge fan of the Smurfs. And she'd been asking me to include them for years. And some of our other players had asked too. When I was in college, we used to play a drinking game where we'd all get together in somebody's dorm room and we would watch an episode of the Smurfs. And every time a character on the TV would say the word Smurf, you had to take a drink, which is brutal, by the way. Because for those who remember, typical dialogue on that show might be something like, Papa Smurf, come quick. Hefty Smurf accidentally hit Brainy Smurf right on his Smurf. What the Smurf are we going to do? That one sentence alone would mean that you'd have to take 6 drinks. So there were a lot of kids who'd get smashed before they could even make it through a single episode. Point being, Smurfs was popular and or notorious on my college campus in the mid 1990s. The general rule that we had in our role playing game is that if there's a crossover between what we have been doing and some other franchise, then via the transitive property, that thing now exists in some shape or form in our role playing game too. So, of course, Marvel and DC would do crossovers like Superman meets Spider Man or Batman meets the Hulk. So we knew that the two of them were going to be in our game. And then we would see a character like Spawn meet Batman or Spider Man. So we would say, well, it looks like Spawn exists in our game world now, too. And Spawn would hang out with the Savage Dragon. And then the Savage Dragon met the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So then the Turtles existed in our game world as well. So, as such, my players were always quick to remind me of a certain TV special that aired in 1990 called Cartoon All Stars to the Rescue. It was basically a 30-minute PSA, but it had everybody in it. And I mean like everybody, including the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who, like I said, at that point were already in our game world, but it also included the Smurfs. So I had a bunch of players over the years saying, because of that, because of my transitive property rule, I should include the Smurfs in our role playing game. But I always said no because I was worried about tone. Well, so I'm at this convention and Michael Bell goes up to bat for the Smurfs. And my family members were there and they liked Smurfs. So finally, I caved in. And there's not really too much to it in terms of story. But the Smurfs found their way into the Continuum Bar and Grill, which we refer to as the CB&G for short. And for anybody listening who doesn't know, the CB&G basically has a magic bar door. So you can walk in any bar at any time in any dimension, and it will transport you into the CB&G. So we had Michael Bell's characters like Hefty, Grouchy, and Lazy walk into the CB&G along with Smurfette, who was played by my wife. And since this was a birthday game, and my wife also loves Disney, and as it turns out, Michael Bell is a huge fan of Disney, then various Disney characters were in there too. And before I go on, I should probably explain exactly what I mean when I use the term birthday game. My dear friend Dave Eckelberger, who sadly is no longer with us, coined the term birthday game about 25 years ago. And he started this tradition where if it is your birthday, you get to pick what the game is about that week, even if it's something that the other players aren't into and normally would never want to play. So while I myself have never really been a big fan of Disney, my wife loves the Disney princess stuff. So for her birthday, those characters were all in the CB&G. And specifically, we said Alice Little was in here and that she was a real little girl who'd lived in the British countryside in the 1800s, where she had many adventures in Wonderland, which her neighbor, Lewis Carroll, wrote books about. Likewise, we said that in our game world, our version of the Smurfs were reimagined through sort of a Dungeons and Dragons lens, and that they were some sort of fairykin who had served as a muse to Peyo, who was a Belgian comic book artist and writer. So the idea was that if the Smurfs seemed too cartoony to meet more serious characters, that was fine. We'd blame that on the comics that were made about them. And we said that those comics were different than the actual Smurfs. Same, by the way, went for the Disney characters. And aside from the parallel between Alice and Smurfette both having cartoony fiction written about them, I wanted Alice in the adventure because in her stories, we're introduced to a bottle that says drink me, which allows her to shrink. So she does exactly that, and she interacts with the Smurfs on their level. And they explore the tiki bar in sort of a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids sort of a way. Then she ate some cake that says eat me, and she grows back to her normal height. Then the Smurfs all have some of that cake too. And by doing this, we got past the scale issues of trying to have tiny Smurfs interacting with non-Smurf characters who are normal size. And as you can see with the channel art, our Smurfs basically look human, but are blue. That made sense to me because if you look at Peyo's art, even Gargamel has that round head, etc., right? So to me, those rounded shape relationships were Peyo's art style and not actually what we should assume that the Smurf species would look like if they were real. Anyways, like all the games that we played at the convention, this one was very brief, and it was really just a bunch of characters hanging out. Nonetheless, we really enjoyed playing this one, and we hope you liked hearing about it. If so, as always, we would love it if you took just a quick moment of your time to smash that like button. Check to make sure that you're subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe you and not tell you, and leave us a comment. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a Smurfy day, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.